Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 322, my proper review. Hey everyone, so here we are. We actually got good stuff for Kirishima. I'm so happy, so very happy. We had that big conversation in the last video, but I am so happy that overall for this chapter we got what I wanted in my heart instead of what I thought was going to happen, which also very surprising. And I have seen a lot of people sad that we're ending Izuku's vigilante era, but like I said in the last video, in my hearts of hearts, I just want Kirishima to get a moment, and I also just want Izuku to stop being stupid. The longer we have Izuku not being stupid, the less All For One can make fun of him. And that's ultimately where I'm at. I don't really care that we're ending it here. It's just like, this is painful otherwise. Again, very surprised because it doesn't feel like Izuku really learned a lot. It feels like Izuku could have gone down a little bit more, and like, you can kind of tell he hasn't learned a lot, because when he goes back to UA, it doesn't take that much to get him to turn around. So I'm just not sure. This feels kinda, doesn't feel solid enough. Doesn't feel like there's enough of a lesson learned here. But that might be an issue of just the way that it's executed. Maybe there is enough here on an intellectual point of view, but I'm not too sure. Regardless, I'm more happy about the things that happen in the chapter. I'm happy with the things with Bakugo. And I'm ultimately happy that Izuku's probably finally going to get a bath. Like, thank God. But, all that said, there are still very interesting things in the chapter that are worth talking about. And I do have one general note that I really do want to cover here. That specifically being Kirishima himself. So when it comes to Kirishima, I'm going to be honest. I don't think this is the best implementation. I think the physics are just incredibly wonky. I mean, I'm not going to go hard into the physics, but I'm just going to tell you, if you jump off an 8-story building and there's a firefighter down below you and he tells you he's going to catch you just with his arms, you tell me whether or not you're going to survive that. But otherwise, yeah, no, the physics I don't think work in any which way. But that leads to a bigger conversation about why did things happen the way they did, and what was going on here. For me, honestly, I don't think it was a good idea for Ochako to release the boys when there was no plan for how to catch them. You can't have Ida not sure about how to stick the landing and then do this whole thing. Like, the release happens because the author wants the Kirishima moment, which leads us into the Kirishima moment. The big thing about the Kirishima moment is I want you to look at how far the author went to get Kirishima to do something. And this leads me into the conversation of, this is why you can't really accept when someone says that there was no other way of making this character viable for a particular situation. The reality is, when the chips are down, a person can get really creative. Now, the type of creativity that the author opted for here was a serendipity-based response, a serendipity-based action. As Kirishima says, he just happened to be there while following Endeavor's orders. That's the serendipity. So this brings up a lot of really interesting conversations when it comes to just writing a story in general. See, serendipity is a very useful tool because depending on how you use it, you can make a really complex situation pretty simple. Like, for instance, in this situation, you don't have to ask the questions of, like, how did Kirishima know to be in this exact location, right? You don't have to ask that question when you can just say, oh yeah, no, I just happened to be there, right? It makes things so much easier. And the thing with serendipity is, depending on how you use it, you could either make something that is perfectly serviceable, or you can make something that people will eventually notice and they'll start yelling about. The issue with serendipity is that when used badly, it turns into a situation where someone can say that the author doesn't know how to write. Like, an author that relies on serendipity to solve every problem probably legitimately doesn't know how to write himself out of big problems. And that would be a bad situation for the author, because eventually the regular reader will catch on, and that's usually where the problems begin, because once you start being called a no-talent hack because you don't know how to write yourself out of situations without resorting to luck, the insults can start flying and you'll eventually lose readers. Now, of course, when it comes to Horikoshi, this is not his problem. Horikoshi has used serendipity before to great effect, such as Gentle and Izuku. That is a situation that can only happen because of a chain of serendipity occurring. You take out any of the serendipitous elements that led up to Izuku versus Gentle, and that fight doesn't happen. Now, again, serendipity becomes a problem when you can notice a pattern, and in terms of patterns, like, the author doesn't do serendipity that often, so there's no real need to criticize him on this one. In terms of the long-standing pattern, So when it comes back to this one, you have this one scene, and ultimately when it comes to serendipity, that kind of stuff, it all comes down to the reader's preference. Some readers are very okay with just happenstance occurring and that being a convenient way of getting out of things, and some readers just don't like it. It depends on what kind of reader you're going to be. If there's something you take away from this, is that the guy just needed this to work. That's why you have something insane like Uraraka turning off the release. The reality is, I think there were many other ways you could have gone about this, both on having Kirishima do something and also how Ochako could have handled that whole situation with them flying through the sky. I think there were many different options you could have taken. And then, you know, as a reader, it ultimately comes down to, what do you think is more improbable? Outfitting Kirishima with some insulator gloves so that he can grab onto Izuku when Kaminari's grabbing onto him, in the same way that Shoji had insulation on his tentacles. Or, you know, Kirishima going up there with Mineta to stick himself to Izuku. Do you think that's more improbable than Kirishima just happening to be in the right place at the right time when the people needed him the most? Which of those situations do you think is more improbable to make work? And then you can kind of figure out whether or not you're the kind of person that doesn't like serendipity, or if you prefer some other kind of logical solution. Again, though, this is probably one of those ones where it's better to take this just from the perspective of, yeah, the guy just needed to get this done, and, you know, he made it work. I'm okay with serendipity occurring sometimes, so long as the author doesn't make a habit of it. And given that the last big time that we had this going down was with Gentle, I feel pretty okay, you know, accepting this for what it is. Again, the physics, super wonky. Ochako's judgment on that one, really questionable. Especially when Ochako's powers have caused someone to die when they fell from a extreme height, like Curious. Given that there's already a precedent for fall damage in Hero Academia, makes it even more questionable. But again, purpose of the story, entertainment value, those for this situation will supersede. I would also like to speak on just what we got in terms of the bare minimums here for people. In this chapter, we got Kirishima and Mina giving their thing to Izuku, which is really appreciated. I would like now to see Hagakure and Aoyama get their thing with Ochako in the next chapter. I think that would be very fair, and maybe that's a little bit of a pattern that's forming there. Fingers crossed. Like, let's get everyone in. We don't want the two most suspicious people in Class 1A to get screwed over in this particular situation. Alright, cool. Those are my general notes. Let's begin with the page-by-page walkthrough. So page 1 is, thankfully, nothing bad is going down. I'm happy with the idea. I like the art. I think page 1 was wonderful. The chapter title was Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite. Okay, I think you could have just called this like Bakugo Rising or Bakugo Origins or Bakugo Redux, something like that. I'm not sure about that title. I feel like it makes it kind of silly, just because, especially because that name is so funny and just how it comes about. Page 2 was Ochako doing release when those guys were still in the sky. I think, honestly, Ida should have just turned around fully and just turboed himself the other way to slow him down so that Bakugo could catch him. But again, the author needed to get Kirishima's moment to work. In this page, you can see some pretty good panel work, which was, I love the curving, and I love Ida actually wondering how he's going to land. Page 3 shows the incredible destruction that occurred when the guy landed, and it's like, alright, yeah, he essentially hit a hard wall going at that speed. And when you see the destruction, it's like, yeah, that was pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. I wonder if Curious would have survived that. Anyway, on this one, we have Aoyama and Toru running in, just reinforcing the idea that the three were together. And we have Kirishima talking about how the story of Izuku had inspired him. He didn't know that was Izuku. Overall, I thought this page was nice. I kind of wanted a little bit more from Kirishima, but well, what can you really do? Now, the author also threw in Kirishima's I won't break rhetoric into this. And ironically, that makes it funnier because it's like, Kirishima, the issue isn't that you're going to break. The issue is that Ida or Izuku's going to break. Like, quite literally, for every force, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Whatever force Kirishima is feeling on his body is coming back to the boys. Ooh. Oh, shonen. Anyway. We go into the next page, which I thought was really interesting. The spoilers had a slightly different connotation to it, and I'm really happy that the official translation didn't stick with that. Specifically, he's bringing up like, oh yeah, Izuku, back then you didn't have any powers, and that's pretty much what we're doing right now. So that's really worthwhile. I was really concerned about this line. So this changing it slightly, I think, works in the long run. Really appreciated. I can appreciate that, yeah, they're gonna try and help him despite being low powered. The rest of page 4 is just everyone showing up. You can see that Tsuyu and Mineta are still hooked together with her tongue. And then we have Ida thanking Kirishima and Kirishima acknowledging, yeah, no, this is just completely random. One thing to point out here is because I know one of the commenters, Viz, thought that Kirishima was heading towards the kids. And this is like the big confirmation. No, he wasn't. No, Kirishima was working with Endeavor the entire time. I think at this point, like the big question is really, what exactly is the excuse for Hagakure not being nearby when it came to fighting Izuku? Like, that's like the big question, because she is so good at stunning. But, you know, questions like that will never be answered because those are too inconvenient. We move to page 5. Page 5 is interesting for Mina, 100%, because Mina is probably the most concerning rhetoric that we've seen so far for a person's mental state. She talks about how she can't stand losing anyone else, and then she ends off, we got classes to attend and stuff, and it's like, you're going back to a period when everything was still good for you. That's a little bit of regression there. That's not good. You can't get back the time that's been lost, and you're not going to go back to classes, not normal classes, until the situation is sorted with quite literally an apocalypse in Japan. So this is probably the most childlike response that we've gotten out of the kids so far. And I feel kind of bad here because, like, she wants to go back to normalcy, and normalcy ain't coming for her. Anyway, I like what Izuku did because he actually talked back to her, saying that he's scared for the people of UA and he doesn't want to make trouble for anyone, and ending with things can't go back to how they used to be, not anymore. I think things can go back to how they used to be more or less once this whole situation is sorted, but Izuku himself also has despair goggles on, so that's why he's talking like that. But I like that he says out loud they can't go back to how they used to be, because I think Mina in particular needs to hear that. Although at this point I'm really concerned for her character here, just because this, again, she seems the most vocally vulnerable here. And then we move into the wonderful Bakugo sequence when Bakugo tells Izuku, hey, do you remember what I said out loud? I'm so happy he asked this question, and I'm so happy that Izuku says, no, I don't. That was hilarious. No wonder this idiot is doing things the way he is. But great, I'm really happy Bakugo got his moment here. Anyway, Bakugo just talks about how he had moved before he noticed. Then he goes just into explaining the whole situation with him and Izuku, that he always looked down on him because he was quirkless and he was supposed to be beneath him. And then, like, Izuku always seeming like he was above him. Yeah, you know, you can go and you can even watch one of my own videos about why Bakugo hates Izuku so much. Like, these are all things we already knew. We knew that he had a complex. We knew that he was offended that someone who was lesser than him was helping him out, therefore putting him in an inferiority complex. We know all this stuff about him. Now, in terms of the art, I do like what the author did, regressing them through the ages. We move into page 7 where he says, like, he keeps Izuku at arm's length. I think we've gotten that information before. The rejection, and then we go into the UA segment where he's talking about how things didn't really go the way he thought it would. And if you recall, back in the first exam, or like, not exam, the first practical the kids have, you know, Bakugo was crying, especially, and back in those days he was pointing out how Momo seemed so much better than he did, how Momo got the better judgment call on one particular thing. So he's just calling back to everything. He had to get really humbled. All the while, you have Izuku having this face going through it, and it's just seeing Izuku staring at Bakugo, mouth wide open, and the mouth slowly getting bigger. It's like, Izuku, are you surprised? Like, I want to know what exactly was Izuku's thought process. The man looks like he can't believe what's being said to him. I mean, yeah, maybe some people on the internet also are kind of emulating Izuku's face here, but it was really funny. You then go into the apology, which was extremely lovely. I also like that everyone was watching this apology happen here. Yeah, overall, I don't think there's any reason to dislike the apology. I think this was nicely done. Maybe you could say, maybe it could have happened in a safer place, but, you know, this is a charged situation. I don't think there's anything legitimately wrong with this. I think Bakugo comes in and he's probably the strongest here. I like that the entire page was dedicated to him saying sorry. I like that Bakugo bowed his head to Izuku as well. Anyway, after that we move into the nuances of page 9, where Bakugo says that, well, actually, this page is just really interesting. Bakugo goes in and says again There's nothing wrong with your ideas so far. It's just, Izuku, you don't know how to take care of yourself. And really, I think that's reasonable. Of course, he pretties it up with that talk about ideals and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, yeah, no. Izuku is just not good at resource conservation. Very fair. Izuku's like one of those people that if he was working at animation studio, he probably is going to work himself to death. Bakugo goes on, and he pretty much says, yeah, if we're going to surpass All Might, we got to be able to help you, the civilians in UA. We have to help everyone. And I like the recalling of saving people is how we win. Honestly, when I saw this page and I saw Bakugo saying this stuff, I'm just thinking, yeah, you know, if Attack on UA happens and Bakugo's there, I actually believe that they legitimately won't suffer the biggest defeat. I actually think when I'm seeing Bakugo talk the way he is here, I legitimately believe that they might be able to get a victory if they have to defend UA. It's just because Bakugo's the guy that forces victory. If you let Bakugo actually be able to contribute for a long period of time and you actually work with him, I think 100% this guy's going to push for victory because that's just who he is. I think we could be seeing something as great as joint training Bakugo versus Class 1B. You know, like, again, whenever you bring up the save to win and win to save rhetoric, I feel like that's like the precursor to Bakugo just being amazing. So I'm very excited for that page by itself. We move into page 10, where this is probably a little bit questionable. I think this one's propaganda, just to validate the kids, but there's a lot of problems here. Anyway, Izuku goes on to say, everyone has always been way ahead of me. No, I think that's extremely unfair. I think that's an extremely unfair sum up for the situation. You can't compare two mindsets. Izuku was given a role by All Might from the very beginning. Him and the other kids are not on the same trajectory. And like, you can go back to the sports festival to like really look at this. But whereas the kids were just focused on the sports festival, All Might had told Izuku, this is where you have to declare that you have come in. Like, Izuku's thing has always been about proving himself to All Might and proving like All Might's judgment was correct. Izuku's not like the other kids. You just can't compare people on different tracks like this. Every other kid is just, they're learning completely different lessons to what Izuku is learning. Mind you, like, there is overlap, but I just feel this is relatively unfair. Izuku is uniquely aware of how bad things can get with All For One. This isn't an issue of them being ahead of him. This is an issue of them just starting from a different perspective. And furthermore, I think this is one of those situations where you can really say the kids get really lucky that All For One is not making good on his promises here and now. Because All For One, if he wants to terrorize Izuku's life the way that he said he wants to terrorize Izuku's life, like whittle down Izuku's soul and all that kind of stuff, you know, he could have done better. He could have been a bigger presence, allowing Izuku to be recaptured by his friends. You know, if Horikoshi wants to save All For One's face here, or save face with All For One, he's going to have All For One be like, ha ha ha, I knew your friends would come back to get you. Therefore, I waited for it, and now I am going to screw them over when you're right next to them so that you realize that you can't be anywhere near them. You guys know All For One. He's such a bag of hot air. But yeah, no, like, if All For One was a little bit more competent, maybe, you know, not counting that he might have a bigger scheme in all this, but if he was a little bit more competent, he would shoot one of those kids in the face right now. Just pick up a gun and just shoot them from a distance. Heck, you know, maybe this would have been the best time to use the gun, but of course, All For One doesn't really care about resource management and just kind of throws people out there willy-nilly just to cause chaos or whatever. Yeah, no, man. This is a situation where they're being saved this is a situation where they're being saved very much by the villain's incompetence. Because if All For One comes in here and he wrecks any of these kids, Izuku's rhetoric is essentially proven right in Izuku's mind. It's going to take a lot more conversation to get him out of it. Everyone here is succeeding only by the graces of All For One letting them succeed. And man, God forbid All For One comes in later saying that this is all according to plan, because that's going to be annoying. Anyway, Izuku apologizes for saying something awful, which I actually really appreciated. Mind you, he's correct when he said they can't keep up with him. But, you know, doesn't need to say that out loud. And, of course, he could be nicer and just actually work with them. So, you know, I think the apology is totally fine. We then go into page 11, which is just more or less a silent page of people watching as Izuku falls over. Ochako's at the back. Momo's alluding to the fact that this is going to be kind of dangerous moving forward. I also think this look that we see on Ochako, I feel like we've seen it before. But I think we saw it at the like when there were, I think we saw it in the aftermath of Gigantomachia's destruction of those towns, where Ochako looked a lot more lost, and this time she looks a little bit more confident. I'm not sure if the author is calling back to that, but I like this shot of Ochako. We move on to page 13, where we get to see number 13's face for the first time. Excellent. People thought that she was a walking black hole, and I'm glad that that's no longer the case. And we have 13 giving us the rundown of what's going on. You know, page 12, I think 13's adorable, whatever. I'm more interested in page 13, where 13 tells us people grow more weary of the anti-hero ideology and decide to move into shelters. Meanwhile, the most of the violent radicals end up forming gangs that are easy enough to track down. So what I want to say here is that I love that the anti-hero people are actually getting tired, because that tells me they're learning. They're realizing, like, yeah, shit, you know, being a hero is tough, which is what we want. We want them to appreciate that things are hard. So I love that. Thank God, because the world is not fair. So good for that. Anyway, the page ends with 13 pretty much saying, like, yo, Izuku, you were helping out there, but come on, let the other heroes and the police take on that burden. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Izuku can afford to just take a break for 5 or 6 days if he wants to. We move on to page 14, where we essentially get the rundown of, hey guys, don't worry, there's more to the UA barrier. When you have Sero saying tip of the iceberg, and when you have a Gakure talking about the details of the system, great. I'm 100% in. Please tell me there's a barrier somewhere in there. I don't mind if the first line of defense is just a metal barrier. That's pretty cool. Anyway, Izuku continues on saying that he wants to honor Class A's feeling, but then he's like, I can't come back. Which is, again, one of those lines that tells you, well, geez, you know, have you really changed all that much? Not really, right? This is one of the ones that kind of set you up for the idea that he was about to turn away from all this. So hopefully with Ochako, he'll get it in his head, but we'll have to see. Now, one last thing. If there's something that confirms that we are 100% going to be attacked at some point, it's that the system can somehow combine with Shiketsu. I don't even know what that means, but maybe it forms a giant force field between them and Shiketsu. Like, I don't know, man. But there's no way they're going to bring that up and then not show us what it looks like, right? Anyway, page 15 is stupid civilians, like always. How these civilians found out, but here we are. Back to civilians. You know, this is one of those moments that kind of makes me wonder, like, hey, is there like a back door that only personnel can use? Because that'd be pretty cool. It's just kind of unfortunate to bring Izuku in through the mob, because other people were worried about Izuku's heart through all this. Anyway, I think something that people have overlooked is that when it comes to the civilians, there are two distinct camps. There are camps that are saying, hey, we believe in the principle. He said we're going to be guaranteed our safety, so we're just going to be cool about this. And then there's the other people being like, no way, brah, there's nothing good here. We had to abandon our homes, and that guy's a ticking time bomb. And I mean, you know, if All For One is for some reason spying on Izuku and is inside of Izuku's body spying on him through there, then yes, Izuku quite literally is a ticking time bomb. And you also have to appreciate that Nedzu knows there's possibly a traitor in UA, and it's extremely ballsy to make that kind of promise when you still don't know who the traitor is. Anyway, Izuku starts turning away because obviously, like, I don't think many people would be able to not turn away, especially in Izuku's situation. But then you have the really cute moment of Ochako grabbing Izuku's arm and telling him, hey, it's gonna be okay. And that was heart, man. That was cute. That was super cute. That was adorable. I love this shot. That was a really adorable shot. Look at that. He looks so vulnerable. And again, you know, props to the author for drawing Izuku in general. I think he's looked really great this entire time. Anyway, we go into page 17, which is Ochako just saying Bakugo did his stuff, Ida did his stuff, we're not letting go of you. And then we have that ever so wonderful line of, when heroes need protecting, who will be there to protect them? You guys know my history with this line. You know how I feel about it. Look, I'm old. I can't anymore. I'm done. I just want this to be good next time. That's all. That's all I want. I just want this to be good rhetoric. I just want this to be something that can legitimately go like, yeah, you know, there's a lot of nuance there. There's a lot of really good feelings there. I don't want it to be something as basic as heroes help heroes, or family helps heroes, or friends help heroes. Heck, if Ochako goes down the line and says like, heroes are saved partly by the people that they save. If you want to go down that line, that will be wonderful. You know, I would love that. But man, I don't know. It's because I forget sometimes that Hero Academia is for children. And, you know, sometimes, despite Twitter's presence, I forget that that this is a thing. It's just like, when you think about it, recently, the author had to make it very clear that the second user was talking about allies that would go with Izuku, when I thought that was a more or less understandable conclusion. So the author might legitimately feel like he needs to beat people over the head with this. But yeah, man, I just want something good for Ochako, which leads me to the next thing. I sincerely hope this isn't the moment of hope for Ochako. I really hope it's not going to be her pleading to the civilians, or her dealing with this moment with the civilians, just because, like, it's civilians. They're useful idiots. They don't know anything. They're quite literally antagonistic. And what's worse, this is only in Japan, right? I don't want her hope to be in something so menial, something so... They're as fickle as the wind. All they need is like a new little bit of outrage, and they're going to be outraged forever. I don't, you know, I want more for Ochako. I just... My big fear is Ochako gets the moment and she doesn't get anything beyond that, and it's just, well, that's not very fair. Like, heck, I would love it if in the future, at a really tense moment, Ochako comes in and does gunhead martial arts on Shigaraki, for example, right? Because I think that'd be so cool, and I think she's actually one of the few people legitimately skilled enough to be able to grab Shigaraki without letting him touch her. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy to think she's got that level of skill, but I could totally see it. I could totally see it. But yeah, that's, in terms of Ochako, that's how I feel about it. I just want her to be treated well, right? I'm hoping that since last time I wanted Kirishima to be treated well, and he got it this chapter, I really hope Ochako gets treated well, and I hope that wish is able to go through, and we're able to get that. Again, this I don't feel that like this for me right now doesn't feel that hopeless. Like, I don't take the civilians seriously. The civilians have been painted to be wrong the entirety of Hero Academia. So again, I don't take them seriously. Like, no matter where you look at this, like, even on the villain side, civilians are the reason that a lot of things are going down. On the hero side, the civilians have always been shown to be people who panic easily and don't know what's going on. I legitimately could not care any less about the civilians when they're at their worst, but I can definitely care about the ones who are able to apply nuance. Those are the ones I really care about, but they are in short supply. Regardless, I'm excited that Izuku's back. In terms of the future now, though, I don't know. This kind of accelerates things. We still don't have All Might. We still don't have Stain's moment. Maybe All Might and Stain will come in later, and Stain will be the one to give us the information somehow. I don't know. Maybe we'll take a little breather arc. I would be actually pretty happy with like 5 chapters of breather, please. Because this is just depressing. I want to just see what's going on. Heck, if you want to do some UA classes, maybe do some extreme combat classes. That said, with Izuku now at UA, you know, Attack on UA is even more on the horizon, so we have to look out for that. I think when Attack on UA happens, there's going to be a giant plot twist involved to make it work. Mind you, we also have to see Shoji's moment. So in terms of things coming in, Shoji, Monoma, and Shinzo, those are the characters we know are going to do something. And of course, Izuku's father, he's going to have to talk eventually. But overall, for Chapter 322 of Hero Academia, a big surprise. I loved Bakugo's moment. I love Ochako's moment, aside from the things that she's saying at the end. And I had fun with the chapter, and I can't wait for the next one here. Since we're going to be going into a break for Hero Academia, I'll give a little more thought to what I think could possibly happen in the future. And if I have any cool ideas, I'll let you guys know on the channel or something like that. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.